How many times have you been on the podcast,
I
Tucker?
believe this is number 4, 3 or 4.
I think it's like 5 or 6. Because even one time, Brian Kaufman, the guy who makes billions and wrote Rounders,
Of course.
he even came on once for his 4th time and said, "I'm finally equaling the number of times Tucker Max has been on the show." So
Yeah,
like,
I haven't been on for a while though, man.
no, you haven't been on a while. We have a lot of catch. I feel like the only times we get to catch up
Or on the podcast.
are on podcasts.
Yeah, I know.
So we've known each other. I feel like in, I don't know, internet years, we've known each other forever.
2 decades or something.
Yeah.
Internet years.
And we've been in the trenches in a lot of things.
Dude, I put Choose Yourself together. I put that whole team together.
Yeah, no, that's
and
just
that was
it.
before my company.
Like just as an example, the book Choose Yourself, you, me, Ryan Holiday were sitting around the table brainstorming titles, marketing, content. Niels Parker, your editor, was the editor on Choose Yourself. You introduced me. Your whole team.
Erin Tyler, who did the cover.
Erin
She
Tyler
says
did
hi, by the way. She loves you.
Love her.
Yeah.
She did the interior design.
She works full time for my company.
I know. I've read her stuff about culture on your company, and then on the podcast, you helped me put together this podcast, like back in 2014.
I forgot I helped.
Yeah, you booked me a lot. You still book me a lot of guests, but you were seriously booking guests then.
Yeah, I couldn't go fast enough for you though. You wanted 4 guests a week, and I'm like, dude, this is too much. I can't do it.
But also, I was driving myself crazy. I was burning out, which I've never succeeded in recovering from. But then you went off to start Book in a Box, which is now Scribe Media. But you've gone through so many reinventions. I want to talk about all those. We've talked about them before, but I want to, now that the world's changed, I want to talk about them again. But just how's it going?
Dude, good, man. I can't complain. I got an amazing wife. I got 2 great kids. Company's doing great. We got an amazing CEO. Like, I got nothing really to complain about.
I should mention too. I should thank you. Like, first off, just as an intro, your initial kind of breakout into the world was, you wrote several amazingly well-written books. I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell, Assholes Finish First, Hilarity Ensues. What's the title? Sloppy Seconds. Yeah. And then you wrote about Mate with
Jeff Miller.
Jeff Miller, about evolutionary psychology and dating. We've talked about all of these books, but I will repeat again. I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell is one of the best written books ever, and many people disagree for weird reasons. Everybody's got their weird reasons.
No one disagrees about the book. They disagree about the ideology.
Well, I think actually most people who disagree just haven't read the book.
No, of course not. It's just a signaling mechanism for
them.
They're going to say, "Oh, I'm so moral and wonderful because I'm going to tell you I don't like this."
Well, okay, let's start with this, because I had a conversation with someone yesterday, saying all this shit about you, and I was like, no, Tucker has been such a good guy to me, such a good friend. I've read all his stuff. What you're saying, he didn't actually write, but
the perception is
I said the story you're referring to, someone literally shit on him. He's self-deprecating.
It was a girl.
He's honest. He was like the only person. The key to good writing is being really just super honest, bleeding on the page. And by the way, as an extra benefit, it's hilarious.
Yes.
And it's like Hunter S. Thompson in the fratire world, which is a genre you invented.
Right.
And all your stories, like I always remember the one story where you're at the Las Vegas bachelor's party and you refer to, there's 2 types of men. There's the ones who are going to go off and they want to do hookers,
coke and hookers, guys, and then there's beer and hot girls, guys.
Right, and like one set of guys wants to have fun with women who also want to have fun,
right?
And the other guys are cheating on their wives,
right?
And I know you. I know your amazing wife, Veronica, your kids, your years and years of Freudian psychoanalysis, Buddhism, everything. Like you acknowledge some of the stuff you've written might not have, might not reflect you in the best light, which credit to you for writing about that. Yeah,
it definitely doesn't.
Right.
There's no argument.
And B, like, it's so, I'm sorry I'm talking so much.
No, please go ahead.
But like I said to this woman, let me recount to you a conversation I had with 3 other men earlier that day, and I recounted the conversation. She was like, "That's disgusting."
What was the conversation? What was the
Uh,
tenor of it?
um, uh, there were two aspects that were the tenor. Uh, uh, One was, I don't mean to be crude on the show, but one was a guy was talking about, um, isn't it great, the first time you experience a blowjob, and they were telling it their
Right.
stories, and then it comes to me, and I said, I don't know, I'll let you know when it happens to me, and of course everyone started laughing,
Right.
and then the next guy was like, he's 50 something. It's like, how can I date a model? And so they were strategizing how to use Facebook, target every, make an ad targeting every woman from 18 to 24 living in New York City who likes Wilhelmina models and put some of your articles on there, and they won't know that you're just targeting them. It'll seem like you're famous. And so this was the kind of conversation. My point being that this is what men are talking about, and
Some men.
Tucker actually, yeah,
Some men,
some men, like,
definitely.
it's not like I was saying, "No, do this,
Right,
this,"
of course, of course.
but, I'm happily in my relationship, and you've known me for a long time. I've been kind of, to a fault, a serial monogamist,
Yep.
and, um, but you actually wrote this stuff and just were honest. Nobody's ever honest.
Uh-huh.
People need to learn how to be more honest in their writing.
Yeah. Dude, it always reminds me of, the fable of the emperor has no clothes,
Yeah.
right? And so, like, the scammer comes in and convinces the emperor that he's got these amazing things and only the smartest, best people can see him, and there's nothing there. So the emperor says he can see him, and then the whole court follows suit, right? And the emperor goes on a parade in his underwear, actually naked, and everyone has to like pretend that it is what it is, right? Because no one wants to be the person who calls out the emperor. But like there's a little kid, right? In the fable, the little kid kind of says loudly, "Why is the emperor naked?" And so the way it's told in modern times is everyone snaps out of the reverie, right? And they all realize the emperor's naked, and then they all kind of learn, right? Do you know what happens in the actual fable?
No, and that's interesting because I know a lot of fables are sort of rewritten for modern times to be nice.
Here's what happens. They kill the kid. Because when you tell the truth to a bunch of people in a delusion, they don't want to hear the truth. They want to live with the delusion because it reinforces their identity and their status, right? And that's kind of the position that I found myself in. I My whole life I was like, I'm gonna tell the truth. I don't give a shit what the consequences are. I don't care. Like, I'm not going to lie either to myself or to others, and that's just it. And so, like, that's why when I wrote my stuff, it never occurred to me that writing down true stories of what I did would be funny to anyone outside of my friends, because we were all doing that, right? And I assumed everyone was doing it. And I assumed, like, oh, yeah, like my friends will think it's funny, but that's it. Turns out, and, being a young, naive guy, and I was very naive when I was younger in a lot of ways. Uh,
Everybody was. That's the
of
point.
course, but I feel like I was even more than most. And turns out no one tells the truth, right? That's sort of one of the lessons of adulthood, is that no adults have it figured out and they're all fucking lying, right? Well, I mean, that's the lesson that I learned. And so my stuff blew up because all I did was stand up and use my real name and tell my real stories about my real life. Not at all saying this is what you should do or this is how you have to be. This is just who I am and what I do, and that's it. And people freaked out, both on both sides. Some people freaked out because they loved that someone was telling the truth, and the arbiters of culture freaked out because I said the emperor has no clothes, and they could not deal with that because that threatens their status and their identity. That's how it plays with me, dude. And I'm not trying to make myself out to be a hero, because someone in that vein I would call a hero is someone more along the lines of Nassim Taleb or Jordan Peterson or those types, right? Those are the types that I would call a hero. I was more of a jester or a gadfly, but it's the same impact.
Yeah, and the way we met, I was almost writing similar types of, it was very honest types of stuff about
You write very
in the
similar stuff
finance
to me. We're
world.
just different people.
Yeah,
So yeah,
and so, like, I was basically saying, all these pundits on these business
they're
shows,
all full of
they
shit.
yeah, they're full of shit, and they've all gone broke. They've all had the worst things. Like, I would write these stories about what would happen to me going broke and all the experiences I've had, and they would trash me on Twitter, but then write me like, "Sorry,
Yeah.
the same thing happened to me also, but I can't actually say that, or they'll never let me back on the show."
Yep.
And I was ostracized for this. And the way you reached out to me when somebody actually was like trashing me and I was responding and you wrote me and said,
No, no, you
"Don't."
wrote a whole piece, I
Mhm.
remember very clearly. You wrote a whole piece about, how like, essentially talking about how you handled, haters and people who trash you, but also kind of fretting over it, right?
Yeah,
And the point you were, I think, making in the piece, if I remember correctly, was like, I have to pretend they don't basically, you were trying to figure out a way to route around the emotional issue, and what I wrote, this is in, I think it's in Choose Yourself. If it's
yeah,
not, it's in a piece you wrote. What I said was, "No, no, no, no. What you have to do is reframe whose opinion actually matters to you, right?" And that's the way, a lot of people who read my stuff, especially ones who are kind of young emotionally, right? Which I was when I wrote my stuff, but a lot of them will read my stuff and say, "How do you not care what other people think?" And I'm like, why? I'm not a sociopath. I care what people think. I just only care about the people I know and the people I love and the people whose opinions I respect. Like if you were to come to me and say, Tucker, I think, behavior X that you did is kind of messed up and we should talk about it. That would impact me and I would talk about it, right? I wouldn't be like, oh, screw you, James. If you don't agree with what I say, then to hell with you. Like I'm not Trump, right? like
right.
I'm not, that's not who I am. Um, but most people, the sphere of, let's say, caring for me is very small and tight. For most people, it's very large and it's like them. It encompasses so many of they and them. And I'm like, I ask people, well, who? Well, what, aren't you upset about what they think? I'm like, who is they? Define they to me. People. What people? Right? And most people can't even define that. If you do get them to define, they'll say things like, well, society, or well, my friends, right? I'm like, what friends? And then you kind of dive them down. Eventually, you'll get to, at the core, either it's parents, right? You'll get that a lot. Well, what would my mom think? I'm like, well, whose life are you living? Yours or hers? One. And two, if your mom doesn't love you for expressing who you truly are, I got to wonder about at least certain aspects of that relationship, right? That's part of it. The other part is they'll say, well, that so many people essentially want to be the crowd in The Emperor Has No Clothes. They don't want to be the ones that say the truth because they are so deeply afraid of being ostracized, being killed, right? And I get it because that's what happens. We're in the age now of this of the
Yeah.
social media lynch mobs coming after people, and I get why people are afraid. But then you got to ask yourself, am I going to speak my truth? Or am I going to be silenced? And if you want to be silenced, that's fine. It's just you're going to live a shitty life.
It's interesting because and I know you go through the same thing every year, like, every year, we're always in a constant state of reinvention, and we'll talk about your various reinventions, but there's always that crowd that is going to hate you for that reinvention. And so every year, somebody starts some groundswell of hate against me, and I have to once again figure out psychologically how I'm going to deal with it. Like, it was just maybe it was like 7 or 8 months ago, like in January, there was so much hate on Twitter against me on a Saturday night at 1 in the morning. And you and I have had this discussion 1,000 times since 2011.
Yeah.
And but there I am, 1 a.m. on a Saturday night, my girlfriend's asleep in the other room, and I'm literally tweeting, "I can't handle this. If someone really has a problem, call me right now." And I tweeted my phone number, and people from Australia were calling me, Canada, LA, and was talking to nobodies till 6 in the morning. And the only thing they would really say was, "Whoa, I can't believe you answered the phone." Yeah, no, I didn't mean it that way. Sorry. Yeah, it's cool that you answered the phone, by the
The
way. And
madness of the crowd, man. In a crowd, people act totally differently than they do as individuals. Yeah.
yeah, but I was stupid for even like I should have just been sleeping. So I w
100%.
and you tell me that every time, but it's still hard. It's still hard when a million people hate you.
Yeah. I mean, I
And I'm
get it,
exaggerating,
man.
it's not a million, but
No,
it
I get
feels
it.
like it.
It is. It is hard. Like, I'm not going to pretend like I have some superpower that like insulates me from that. But like, I'll tell you, man, there's a great book out about this now. So the three great, and this is going to answer the question, the three great titans of 20th century sort of psychological thought. Actually, there were four. The four great titans of 20th century psychological thought were William James, um, Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, and then there's this other guy that everyone forgets about, named Alfred Adler.
I was gonna
Right?
say Alfred Adler. I love Alfred Adler. I love
It,
everything he writes.
Adler's stuff can be a little difficult to really apply because he wrote in the sort of mid 19th century sort of way that academics wrote. But there's a book called The Courage to Be Disliked by two Japanese guys, actually, that just got translated into English.
The courage to
The
be.
Courage to Be Disliked.
Hmm.
And it
Oh, I have seen this.
it's a fantastic book.
It's funny. I've downloaded, but I have not read it yet.
You should read that. I think it would really, really help you. Um, the basic point of Adler's sort of idea is that other people's opinions of you are their problem, not yours, and he kind of
Which
walks you
intellectually
through.
I believe in, but when you see people, and I'm sure I've seen people I've given jobs to, I've seen people I made money for trashing me suddenly, like, "Oh, James is totally."
So, but that's there. So here's the thing. So, like, think about this. Think about the psychological cost of that. If let's say I'm that, like, I'm person X, and I used to work for you, and you did all this stuff for me. Right now, I kind of got big a little bit on my own. Like, you and I know who I'm talking about. I've dealt with people like that in my life, right?
Yeah,
And several.
yeah,
And then once they get big on their own, then they're like, okay, now I'm gonna go crap on the guy who helped me here. That's super common. Not everyone does that, but that's super common. And so there's two ways to react to that, right? There you can internalize that and you can make that about you, or you can realize, you know what? That's their decision, and you know now, okay, I'm not going to deal with them anymore. Now I know who they are as a person. And that's fine. I'm just going to not interact with them in my life, but they're going to have to bear the psychological cost of that, not me. They made the decision to essentially be an awful person.
and I guess they're
Okay.
trying to outsource that stress that they have to you.
Yes, exactly, right? And so they have to live with that. You can make yourself live with it, but you don't have to. Right? And it's not that it doesn't hurt. Okay, yeah, it hurts. Like I thought I knew someone, I trusted them. I gave part of myself to them and they rewarded me with treachery. That sucks and that's not fun, but you can deal with that in that moment, and then you can just move forward with your life and realize, okay, like I need to, maybe learn what I need to learn from that, but I'm going to move on, and I'm only going to have people in my life who give to me in the way I give to them. And yeah, but there is a cost to pay for that, man. Like, you cannot, it takes courage to sit there and understand, you know what, not everyone's going to like me, and especially when you do something. And even aside from the identity social justice warrior mobs now, like, let's go back 8 years. That didn't really exist, at least not it existed against me, but only at the fringes, right? Um, Regardless of the social times, whenever you do something at all, some people will hate you for it. Right? It's called tall poppy syndrome in Australia.
What's it
The
called?
tall poppy syndrome, the
Hmm,
idea is in a field of poppies, the tall one gets cut down,
hmm.
right? And so the reason they're going to hate you is because your growth, when someone sees you grow and do something, anything, even on a really small scale, get a promotion at Subway, for God's sake. I mean, I'm not talking about being a master of the universe, although it
Right.
extends to that. I'm talking about go from a line worker to assistant manager at Subway. The other line workers will hate you, or they have one option. They need to root for you. They need to say, you know what, that's a good person. They worked hard. They deserve it, right? They can see it as something you did, or the other way, depending on the type of person they are and how they emotionally orient to the world, they have to hate you because your success to them reflects on their lack of success. And so now they have to face the fact that they didn't work as hard as they could have. Assuming, let's say, they want the promotion, right? They didn't work as hard as they could have. They didn't do the things necessary to get promoted. And so, like, does that I mean, call it anger, they can either turn that inward and see, you know what, I haven't, and they can take responsibility for their actions and then change their actions to then get promoted. Or what a lot of people do, I don't want to say most, but a lot of people is they can externalize it. And then now they can come up with a story. Well, James buttered up the manager and he's taking credit for my work, and they can make you evil, right? That's what people have to go one way or the other.
Well, it's interesting because, one of your reinventions, of course, was when you teamed up with um, a prominent evolutionary psychologist,
Hmm.
and you had a podcast with him. You did the book Mate about, using evolution, as opposed to the pickup artist scene. You used evolutionary psychology to more deeply understand dating and how it works. So part of this is related to that. When someone sees you, when someone sees another person move up in status, we get back to the DNA
Yes.
of our
Yes.
primate ancestors, which is that cortisol spikes. And there's people don't realize there's two ways to deal with it, which is what you just said. One is to feel like, try to put the other person down in status,
Right.
which then relieves the cortisol.
Uh-huh.
And the other is to kind of go along with it and say, oh, okay, maybe this is
Take
aspirational to me.
responsibility for
And that
yourself.
will relieve the cortisol.
Yes.
So the body just wants to relieve the cortisol.
Well, there's actually 3 ways. So you just talked about the 2 most common ways. The third way is kind of what I was talking about, and this is like the advanced sort of uber Buddhist way, is to realize that none of us are actually in competition, right?
Hmm.
That with the exceptions of some literal things like if you're playing in the NBA, you are in competition with the other like with very specific bounded
Well, in
games.
art, yeah, in man-made rule
Right,
driven
right. In
things.
bounded games, in chess, we're clearly in competition if we're
Right.
playing, right? Um,
But we
uh,
agree in advance to be in
exactly. When we
competition.
agree we are in a finite game, right? You can realize you actually are not in competition, right? It would be so easy for me to look at you because when we started, I think I was probably bigger socially than you, media wise. Now I think you're much bigger than I am. It would be so easy for me to like be jealous and hateful and whatever. But like we're not competing, man. Like your success doesn't detract from mine, and vice versa. That now I don't want to say like I'm like this everywhere because I am not real good at that in certain other areas of my life. I have to catch myself, right? Like I'll see a company in a competitive sort of space to us. Like we don't really have true competitors, but we have alternatives that you can use, right, to help write your book. And I'll see someone doing well. I get that feeling you're talking about, right? Where it's like, screw them, or like, okay, we got to double down and be more responsible. The, be more responsible and focus on yourself is the better alternative other than trash them, right? But the best alternative is to realize, and I tell this to my team all the time, and my CEO and I have discussions about this all the time. We don't actually have competitors. Now, that's not necessarily true in all business, but we don't. We are in a white space, a new field that is opening up. And if we just
And it's
focus,
an enormous space.
exactly, it's a multi-billion dollar space. And if we just focus on our customers and ourselves, we are going to win. And
Well,
whether we're first or not, we're going to win.
and it's because and we're sorry. Um, you're in a space that's obviously a writing space. I want to talk a lot about Scribe and what you do. Basically, help people with stories, but don't have necessarily the skills or the time to write a book. And by the way, it's a hard skill that people don't realize is very, very difficult. You help them put out an amazing book. A recent customer who's been on the podcast is one of my all-time favorite comedians, Tiffany Haddish. You guys wrote a great book for her.
Yep.
It was amazing. She was amazing. And also it's a testament to you guys that she chose you. She was going through her biggest peak upswing in career. I mean,
Mhm.
which just keeps going, and she chose you to work with. It's another thing that came up in topic yesterday with my friend was that like, look, Tiffany Haddish, it's not like she didn't know who Tucker Max was, and she chose him. She had many choices. She chose him to write the book with.
Yep.
So, but I want to get to that in a second. One thing I've noticed with you is as part of these reinventions, I think at first, it's what you were just saying. At first, you were really into the numbers. How many people are following the blog, buying the book, following me on social media? Now, because you're focused on the business, seems like and you focus on your family, seems like you took a step back from that worry, which is an addiction, that worry. Like that,
Yes.
so many millions of people are addicted to how many Instagram followers that I gained today. I see it.
Yeah.
People with like 3,000 Instagram followers will come to me and say, I lost 15 followers
Yeah,
today.
right. Or I didn't
Like,
get 25 likes on my post
right,
today.
right, and they
Yeah.
count it minute by minute, like, I see, like, if they'll post something, and then within 2 minutes, if they're not hitting their average likes per minute,
Yeah.
they'll take down the post, like, in 2 minutes. And I feel like you've weaned yourself. I've had that addiction, and I've lowered it a little lately, but it's still I still think about it. I feel like you've weaned yourself completely off that addiction. So how do you wean yourself
Man, I
off
wish, dude. I
the
love when people tell me, "Oh, from the outside, everything looks great," and I'm like, "Nah, it's turbulent seas in here, man. Like, it may look great, but it's not how it
I
is."
believe it, but again, but as we mentioned, we get to update all in these podcasts, and you've been such a mentor to me through the years, which I'm grateful for. I get to ask you these questions right now that I'm working through.
Yeah, you know what's funny? The first thing I think about is, like, I feel like it's weird. We live in a world right now, I think this is slowly changing, but we live in a world where that addiction is actually beneficial to you if you are in the media and if you have a media-centered business, which you do, that addiction actually helps the business. So,
Sure.
at least in the short term, right? In the short term, that's one of those things where it's like, that works, right? Um, the way that I've dealt with dealing like that is it wasn't really a conscious thing, man. It was like I think it was just this is more of a slow thing, but as I kinda went through therapy and as I kinda really dove into myself and my emotions and all that kinda stuff, I really just went to the core question. And the core question for me is, why do I do any of this? What does this matter? Right? What really matters to me? And the answer I always came back to were there are only two things that matter. The relationships I have with the people I love, right? Which at the core is my family, and then radiating out for that are my friends, like people like you, all the people I work with, all that kind of stuff. And then the work that I do that helps those people in the world. Those are the only two things that actually matter. And once I really emotionally connected with that, it's like I just couldn't get into it's like all the volume on the media stuff just turned all the way down.
But don't you feel like let's say thousands of people on or millions of people on social media suddenly are trying to pull you down for whatever these reasons we discussed
Mhm.
before? Don't you feel like a little bit these anonymous people have their hands in your pocket trying to stop you from doing what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, of course, to some extent.
Like
Yeah.
after you know, your business always gets to new and new levels in terms of recognition and fame and
Mhm.
success. And the book with Tiffany Haddish, that's probably the biggest celebrity you guys have worked with to date. I'm sure you're working with more now.
We got 3 coming that are big,
Yeah?
real big,
They
yeah.
coming on the podcast after they
Well,
publish, or are they too big?
Nassim Taleb, have you ever had
Oh
him?
yeah, you're doing 2 books with him.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're
and it
doing
seems
2
to
books with him.
I think I'm the only podcast he's ever been on.
Yeah, yeah, no, Nassim
I've
likes
known
you,
him for 20 years.
and then we're doing, David Goggins, right?
Yeah, yeah.
David's oh, dude, his book's
Seal.
so good. And then we're doing this is crazy. We finally signed the deal with them. They've paid. They're in the process right now with the Nobel Prize Committee. Like the Nobel Prize in Norway. They're doing it's an academic book, so this isn't going to be like a big thing. But they're doing because they want to publish the book in America and they don't want to go through traditional publishers. Nassim Taleb, who has a paper in the book, convinced them to own the rights and so referred them to us. So we got those 3 are coming a real big. A couple of others, David Bach, who's sold millions of books in finance, Gino Wickham, who did Traction and all those sorts
Yeah.
of. We got a lot of
By
those
the
people
way,
coming.
and Nassim Taleb, who is an intellectual powerhouse, like, I think if all you do is read the titles of his books,
All
it'll
right,
change your life.
seriously, his
So,
books
but
are I think sentence for sentence some of the most condensed, dense wisdom on earth.
I would say, and just the words again, anti-fragile and skin in the game
Yeah,
have changed my life. But then when you read the books and you connect the dots to so many other parts of your
mind
life, it's
bending.
amazing.
Yeah.
Because he focuses on his things, but you could take those concepts and focus them on other things in the exact same way, and it's brilliant. But even in my podcast with him in 2014, he speaks very highly of you. Which again, I'm glad the Nobel Group is going to work with you because again, this virtue signals to everybody who's saying, "Well, didn't he do this and this and this?"
So let me. I know the question you're asking. So like we've actually strategically made a decision in the company, and you're going to start to see this play out, right? Is that for when we started as a company because we help people turn their ideas into books, right? That's what we do, and so I was sort of I had to be the linchpin of it because I'm the guy who's written, genre creating multi almost decade best selling books, right? So I kind of had to be that for credibility and for all that. So I had to be the linchpin. But now we're up to 40 people full time and 100 something freelance. And our CEO, JT, is amazing. And way better than me at business and at team building. And I always say, like, my team, our team tolerates me, but they would lay in the road for him. You know, like if anything happened, they'd be like, "All right, Tucker, thanks." And they would literally all go with him.
No, and I've read his book too.
And I
He's
don't blame
amazing.
him. Like I would too. In a split, I would go with him. I wouldn't even go with me.
Well, you stepped down as CEO
Right,
to
for him.
basically take a guy. You did his book. He, and you and I both feel the same way about education, but he doesn't have a high school education, which is fine for
He did
me. But
graduate from high school, just barely. He had to go to summer school to graduate. Yeah,
eh,
no college.
son of a pimp, one of 23 children of
Yeah.
a pimp, raised in foster care. A lot of people would be judgmental about that. You did his book, and then you immediately stepped down as CEO and made him CEO of your company.
Yeah, no,
So,
no doubt. But here's the point I was making is, yeah, like he's an amazing speaker, an amazing thinker, an amazing leader, an amazing man, and like this, it's why did I step down as CEO? Right, it all comes down to what was the company about? Was it about me or was it about our authors and our mission? Because if it's about me, I was going to stay, but if it's about us and them, I needed to step down, and
and I
so
think that was an evolution for you.
it was 100%. It was an
I think
evolution.
initially you not that you wanted it to be about you, but in your mind it was about you.
It defaults to that, you know, like, I mean, that, of course. But it was a major evolution. It was a major decision. I would say it's one of the three most important decisions I've made in my life, period. Not even just
Okay,
business,
let me
right?
guess. That choosing Veronica because you
Marrying
chosen
her,
a
we kind of chose each other.
yes.
I didn't
All
just go
right,
to
all
the
right.
store and buy her, right?
But she's an amazing woman. And
Yeah.
then what's number 3?
Moving to Austin.
Oh, okay.
Those would be the three.
Where did you move from? I
I was
forget.
in LA right
Okay.
before that, yeah. So but anyway, here's the point I was making, is we're kind of in that same point with media, right? Where it's like I was kind of the face of it for a while, but like for a lot of reasons, I think it just doesn't make sense to make me the face of it anymore. And JT is now going to be the face for many, many reasons. And so now, literally, my job in the company, we just made this shift this month. My job in the company is taking all my skills in media and content and brand building and applying them to him. We're going to build his brand and put his knowledge out there and create like a massive sort of, I think, community around him. One, because he's amazing and people will want to hear what he has to say 100%. But two, because like I said, if it's about me, the decision is different than if it's about us and about the company and the tribe and the authors and the mission we're on. If it's about all that, he needs to be the face, and it is, and so that's what we're doing.
I think that's smart because again, no matter what you do, you're no matter how great your
I come
books
with
were,
baggage,
yeah,
dude. Straight up,
you
I
have
do.
baggage and particularly in this Me Too environment, that's gonna uh 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 block people who haven't
Right.
read your books.
Fair or unfair, and I
Yeah,
think
fair or
most of it's
unfair.
unfair. But it's sort of like, why stand outside and scream at the sky?
So
Like, just accept reality.
let me play devil's advocate on some of your statements on that because also I don't want to make this a total love fest because I'm also just curious.
Right.
So in one interview I read with you, so there's this hilarious story in I hope they serve beer in hell, and this was also in the this story was the first scene in the off Broadway show. I hope they serve beer in hell,
Yeah.
and it was
And in the movie.
in the movie, and uh, there's a guy. You write the story. I don't know how old you were. You're in your early 20s, which is like 30 years ago almost. There's a
It would be
you,
20 years ago, but that's cool.
you,
I'm not 50, man.
I don't know. I always assume everyone's the same age as me. So you're with a girl, everything's going crazy, you're drunk, a horrible thing happens to you at the end, which people should read the book. But um, this was a topic in an interview with you. Someone is in the closet videotaping you,
Uh-huh.
which again, you've described your reinvention, the years of psychoanalysis. You say you weren't a good guy all the time,
No,
but
of course not.
on your specific response to her question on that, um, you said non-consensual sex is different from recording an event, and you're correct technically,
What?
and
What?
it's legal too. Recording an event, and it's state by state the laws
Right.
on consent to that. But is that in some way kind of a harassment act against the woman you're with?
No. It's not
So
harassment.
I'm calling you. You
It's not.
said
No, no,
I
no,
could
dude.
call
It's
out
not.
behavior.
Of course. I'm happy to talk about any of this. It's not harassment. What it is a fucking dick move. Not harassment. Like they're totally different things. There's no question of consent or anything like that with me and the girl. It wasn't
Okay,
even a
in the
thing.
article you said you didn't say it was a total dick move. You just argued kind of the Me Too kind of component, or at least that was what was reported. Um,
I'm not sure. I don't know which interview you're
she
talking
just
about.
she I forget the article actually. Yeah, I felt while reading it this person hadn't read any of your stuff. It's one of those things where
Of course. I
yeah,
mean, anyone who's doing a piece on me now about what I wrote about frat tire stuff has an agenda, and it's just a signaling. It's just a
right.
virtue signaling agenda. What I say doesn't matter. I am just a something for them to burn in effigy.
Can I just tell you a story? So, and then I want to get back to this point, but uh someone, when I was selling this very legitimate course on cryptocurrencies and so on
Right,
to
of
to
course.
help my readers deal with
Oh, I
this
know. I saw
complicated.
that whole firestorm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one person from I think it was BuzzFeed or Wired, uh, she asked me a ridiculous question. She said, "When you say Amazon might do this, are you manipulating the price of Amazon?" And I said, Amazon's like almost $1 trillion company, and billions of shares are sold a day.
And
Can
thousands of media pieces are written every year.
Yeah, and can you I just I want to hear you say, "Of course." I just want you to repeat the phrase, "Of course, there's no way James Altucher could manipulate the price of Amazon stock." And there was total silence on the other side, and I was silent. I was not going to say another thing. And she said, "Okay, yeah, there's no way James Altucher could manipulate the price of Amazon stock." And then what appears in the article the next day?
I know it's
James Altucher manipulated the price of Amazon stock.
of course, dude, because people will learn someday that media is not about facts. Media is about manipulating an emotional response to control. It's about setting the frame to control the discourse. I mean, that's like, and I don't mean right or left. They're both the same. It's just two different tribes fighting
What do you mean
of
studying the
tribal warfare.
frame?
Meaning the Overton window, right? Like what you're allowed to discuss versus not discuss. Like it's why I mean, we can go super super deep into this, but if you look at any media piece about me, right? In mainstream media, I mean, no one ever talks about if you were to read a piece on me, and not know anything about me, it would almost be like, well, why would anyone read this? Like his stuff, like why? How could anyone even be a fan, right? And that's actually, if you look at all the mainstream media pieces about me, they are all uh part media elite writing to other media elite, trying to convince them that it's okay for them to dismiss me, right? Dude, with literally no media support at all, I sold 3 million books to people who don't read. No, seriously. Like, I mean, and about 60 to 70% of my fans, at least that would buy, by sales, we think are men, right? But now, listen, by event, I mean, because I did hundreds of events, more than 50% of the people who showed up were women. But by sales, it was probably a majority of at least 60% men, right? And these are young guys. Young guy. I have literally tens of thousands of emails from people, men and women actually, who say, I've read one book this year. I've read one book in the last 10 years. I've never finished a book outside of school except for yours, right? And so no one in media ever talked about any of that, ever. No one ever addressed why my stuff was popular, why people loved it. All they did was attack me because I was the kid who said the emperor has no clothes, right? Yeah, and you want to see how this plays out with someone else. Look at what's happening to Jordan Peterson now. Jordan Peterson is very, very different than me, but doing the exact same thing. He is smashing the Overton window of the accepted sort of social justice media leftist discourse, right?
Well,
Smashing it.
eh,
And look at every single piece about him in New York Times or New Yorker or any of those places. Every piece, in no way, shape, or form do they address why is this dude so popular. This guy is selling out 2,000 and 3,000 person stadiums to talk about philosophy.
Yeah,
For fuck's sake,
and
no one talks about that. Why? Because what his narrative is not in their accepted narrative. And so what they have to do is attack him. They have to destroy him, at least to themselves, right? Because otherwise, they then have to rethink really what it is. He's beat them in the status wars. He has beat them, and they are now trying to they're arguing. If you look at every piece about Jordan Peterson, same as every piece about me, the argument boils down to here's why he should be considered low
well,
status.
and I will say, like, because I've read some of the articles trashing him the most, and he's been on this podcast. I've read his book like 5 times. Uh, I could always tell the writers of these articles haven't read his book. I
Dude,
mean,
of course not.
they
Why?
they
It,
they say things
James,
that
when
in an
you are in an ideological battle, facts are irrelevant.
right.
If you look at them like, here's a good way for Americans to think of it. Look at them as, look at the writers as agents of propaganda for Nazis or communists. Like, look at Nazi propaganda, look at communist propaganda, right? Whichever side you are. Like, look at the actual Nazis and the actual Soviet communists. Look at their propaganda and then look at what's written about Jordan Peterson. It is literally exactly the same template and format because this is not a discussion about facts. This is not a discussion about anything at all. This is a status debate about one tribe versus another. And that's it. That's all it is, dude.
Right, and so the point is, a little bit, I think a lot of people buy into the idea that, "Oh, if the media says something, then that's what we should bow down to," but Jordan Peterson, like many writers we know who are actually great writers and thinkers, he is saying what is true to him, and he's studied it and researched it for
Well,
decades. This is his personal experience. I mean, chapter 1 of his book, 12 Rules for Life is make your bed. Like,
dude,
he's not saying these
well,
horrible things, and they're saying, "Oh, no, he said this, this,
because
this." He didn't say
do
any
you
of that.
understand I don't think you understand what's going on. Here's what's going on. The For 100 years, the mainstream media controlled the narrative in this country, right? Controlled it. If you were not, if you did not go through the major media channels, you did not have a large audience. Period. Point blank. That is done. That is over. Now, they don't realize it and they won't accept it. This is all deeply unconscious for them. I was one of the first breaks in the dam. I was the first person to ever go blog to book. I was the first one blog to bestseller, first one blog to movie, all of that stuff, right? And so a big part, there were two reasons why mainstream media hated me. They didn't hate me so much early on because I was coming an alternate route. It was much more, I got caught up in the second wave feminist debate about all men are evil, women are good, which you see is peaking now, right? I was just an early sort of entrant to that. But as I got bigger, you saw them all turn on me because I didn't go through any of the approved channels. I didn't drape myself in literary pretension. I didn't live on the Upper East Side and go to the right cocktail parties and all that bullshit, right? I said fuck you to them and I went directly to fans and it worked. Jordan Peterson is the exact same. The mainstream media, everyone who writes and grew up in the mainstream media did it because they want to be, at their core, gatekeepers of opinion. And Jordan Peterson is absolutely resilient to any of their opinions on him, which makes him quite literally an existential threat to them in their mind. His status, essentially hierarchy, is outside of theirs. And they want, in their mind, all media must be on our status hierarchy. And so that's why they hate him so much. And that's why it looks like almost like a coordinated effort. It's not. No one's sitting in a back room saying, all right, we got to kill Jordan or trash Jordan Peterson. It is an emergent property of how their minds think and the type of person who rises in that sort of essentially bureaucracy, that media bureaucracy.
So it's interesting because I've been on some podcasts recently from people who have been kicked out of, let's say, that world,
Yes.
and now they have to find their voice. And what they realize, it's like life changing. They suddenly realize, oh my gosh, I could be honest about how I feel, and there's a much bigger audience that have been quiet that is ready for me to hear honesty. And I think that's what Jordan
Most
Peterson went through.
everyone breaks the mirror that reminds them of their ugliness, right? Dishonest people always hated me. They've always hated you. They hate Jordan Peterson. Dishonest people hate people who tell the truth because it makes them, even if it's unconscious, reflect on their dishonesty.
Is it dishonest or is it some sort of
They're being dishonest to
laziness?
themselves.
Like they're too lazy to figure out how do I
No,
really feel about these
I don't think it's
opinions.
laziness, especially when their dishonesty is rewarded. So all the finance guys you were talking about,
Yeah,
who privately would tell you they were right and publicly played a different face, that's not laziness, dude. They're putting
right,
on that bullshit public face so that they are on CNBC.
right.
They are they are putting on a mask that is totally disingenuous to who they really are so that they get the benefits and the accoutrement of being in the media spotlight. That's nothing more than straight dishonesty and lie at a core level for them.
And it really does have to do with the uh, almost not reading the facts. Because again, we both know Jordan Peterson. He's very simple philosophy, simple guy, but just straight out honest. Your stuff.
This is a core tenet of his philosophy is always tell the truth.
Right, and he's a super nice guy. I've never heard him say a single thing even remotely related to what they say he says, because I know he can't possibly
Of
say these
course.
things. But I think it's hard to like, when you're on the side of mainstream media, it's like you're joining a team that will reward you. So I can make a tweet.
It's a tribe.
Yeah,
God, you stop even using the word facts. Facts are irrelevant in
right.
tribalism, right? Like, think about we grew up when Soviet Russia still existed and was an enemy, right? In that time in American history, nothing. The Soviets were the other team, right? And America was our team, and nothing they did could be right, and everything we did was right. If you look at go look at what people wrote at the time, it will blow your fucking mind, right? There's no difference with anything else, dude. When someone this is like there's 100 years of research on this. No one wants to face this or talk about this or think this though. When you have an identity, most people, almost everyone, once they lock in their identity, there is no fact that will ever shift them off that identity, ever. And they will literally ignore things clear as day right in front of their face, even things that threaten their lives, if it threatens their identity. That is the way humans are designed. That like it takes a transcendent soul to be able to even broach that a little bit and think a little bit independently, much less actually transcend identity, dude.
Well, and I think the reason I say the word laziness is, let's say you're up and coming, whether it's media or writing, or you're trying to figure out what success means to you. It's very easy to join the mainstream team, make a funny
Yes.
tweet
Yes.
that they all agree with,
Yes.
and even if you have no Twitter followers, suddenly you have 10,000
Now you're
likes
in the
on your
system.
tweet. Right. So
Mhm.
so that's like kind of this easy way to kind of, hey, oh my gosh, everybody approves of what I'm doing. I have some status. It's actually the reason
Then
why.
you have to fit into the approved narrative if you want to stay.
Right, and the reason why I say lazy is there really isn't an opposite team. Because what happens, you and Jordan Peterson and me and other people we know, we're not really saying the same things. We
No,
all have our different
no.
things. So there's not like one single narrative like that we meet at a club and talk
No, the
about.
opposite team used to be in America was conservatism, right? And you and I
Yeah,
and
we're
Jordan and
apolitical.
Rogan and Weinstein, all those guys, none of us fit on the conservative side at all in any way, shape, or form, right? Because in America, conservatism used to overlap heavily with religion and fundamentalism, and
I
those
have
were
to ask who you meant by Weinstein.
Eric Weinstein.
Oh, okay, all right.
Of course.
Not
Oh
Harvey
yeah.
Weinstein.
No, no,
I
no.
just had to. I
Harvey.
have to.
No, that's actually
I have to underline it. That's
Harvey
why.
Weinstein was a
Eric
pillar
Weinstein's
of the
brilliant.
social justice community and like that sort of community. I'm talking about Eric Weinstein and his brother Brett Weinstein. There are a lot of Weinsteins, dude.
Yeah.
Like, but you're right, of course. Anyway, so like all the people that I think Eric Weinstein calls, he kind of put them in a group and called them the intellectual dark web, right? It's essentially what it essentially is centrism in a way. It is libertarian centrism, which was not in any way, shape, or form a coalition or even a party in America. But the way that I mean, dude, like the way that the media has shifted, it's not even left. It's not left anymore. It is now authoritarian left, right? Sarah Jeong is the perfect example of this. Did you see this about who they hired in the New York Times?
No,
They hired a woman. I think her is pronounced Sarah Jeong. Sarah Jeong,
I don't
who
read the news at all.
Yeah, I don't either. I just saw this in Twitter.
Yeah.
Basically, like she got hired to the New York Times editorial board, and she is the most racist person I've ever seen openly on Twitter. It's just that she's racist against white people. And you think like if I were to tell you what her tweet said, you wouldn't believe me. There are things like cancel white people, who the kill white people, all the like crazy stuff, like nuts. To the point where this other woman who's black, Candace Owens, took literally word for word Sarah Young's tweets. She tweeted them, but replaced black or white with black, and the Twitter algorithm blocked her, deleted her account. Right? Candace Owens, right? Anyway, so point is that woman was not just hired to the New York Times editorial board. The New York Times then doubled down and defended her. And now the entire left, you like Vox is writing explainers about how delete white or cancel white people is not racist against white people. Literally, they are twisting themselves in the most preposterous intellectual knots where if you show what they write to anyone reasonable, they're like, what the hell are they talking about? This is quite literally the definition of racism. Because that's how tribalism works, dude. That's how it infects and destroys your brain, is that facts become irrelevant. All that matters is keeping the identity of your tribe together and isolated and keeping the other, right? There's a great book on this, and there's a guy you should have on your podcast. His name is Robin Hanson. The book's called Elephant in the Brain.
I don't know that
It
one.
is the most mind-bending book you will probably read in the last 5 or 10 years. It is mind-bending, right? And most of the stuff he writes about, like if you really know evolutionary psychology and you really know psychology, it wasn't kind of revolutionary, but the way that he puts it together, most people don't know that stuff, but the way he puts it together and then he shows how it impacts sort of action, it like most people will freak out. Like, I mean, you go to like healthcare is such a good example. Um, we spend the most per capita on healthcare, and we have the worst results because what he kind of shows very empirically is that healthcare is about looking good, not actually about being healthy. In America, that's the way that it kind of works, right? It's a status thing, it's a tribe thing. It's not about the actual results. That's what I'm all media discussion. If you take off the lens of fact, if you stop pretending it's facts and you look at it as every argument in media, and even the news arguments, because opinion at least doesn't pretend, but all of it is opinion, and all of it is a debate over who should be higher status and who should be lower status between differing tribes. That's all it
And
is.
so the problem is again, there's a team on one side, which is let's just call it mainstream media, but I even hate that word because it's a cliche almost. And then the other side is you can't have a team of all people just being honest about their truth because there is no one truth, and we all have
You
our
weren't
own
able
set of
to
experiences.
before. You weren't able to before. I think we are seeing a shift in the American political and media landscape where that's going to happen. I think
I mean, it's
it started
it's
already.
already happening, but it's secretly because it's not as if you're in jail for speaking your truth. You're a successful person.
Well,
Jordan Peterson's
look what just
successful.
happened to Alex Jones.
Yeah.
Totally deplatformed
And by the way,
all at
even
once.
if you disagree with him,
I mean, of course, Alex Jones is he is a
there's people much
tinfoil
worse
hat
on
wearing
Twitter.
like kook. Like, just
Yeah.
don't come on. Like, of course, man. This guy thought Sandy Hook was a false flag. Come on, dude. Like, really? But that's the point. Is either we are a free speech society or we are not. And Alex Jones was literally simultaneously deplatformed by all the major tech platforms except for Twitter, which actually shocked me. I was surprised at how like free speech they actually are. And all the arguments now against Alex Jones are like they're preposterous, dude. Like there is no definition of free speech that man does not fit under. That has nothing to do with the content, right? Like I don't listen to his stuff. I can't stand it. I think it's ridiculous. That's not the point. That is absolutely not the point. The point is that authoritarian left has now infiltrated sort of tech platforms, and they're like, it's like, okay, we can't win these debates, so we are going to silence people. That is literally what is happening. That is absolutely what is happening. And dude, it didn't start with Alex Jones. I mean, this stuff started first with the alt right, Stormfront, whatever. At least there's an argument there. Those are the identity politics people on the right. They're like the actual Nazis, right? They're like the actual white supremacists. That's the right equivalent of the left that I'm talking about. You can at least make an argument that those people shouldn't have access to that they step outside the bounds of speech because they are advocating violence on races, right? Okay, I get it, no problem. No one really defended them. Don't expect it. After that, what happened? Then they came for the sex workers, right? They came for the prostitutes. They came for the escorts, and I forget the name of the law, but basically, like the the last 15 years had seen an incredible reduction on violence and crime and assault against sex workers. Why? Because they were able to essentially create their own platforms on the internet. They were able to get out from under the thumb of pimps. They were able to essentially like create their own businesses, connect directly with customers. All the things everyone else is doing, Uber, whatever, work for sex workers was great, right? What's the law? I can't remember. The point is, they essentially they were all banned in the name of stopping sex trafficking. It was total bullshit, right? It's just fundamentalist prudism on the authoritarian left is all it is. And so now you've seen an incredible in the last year rise of all the pimps are back, all the crime and all that shit's going through the roof, right? They were deplatformed. Now it's Alex Jones. After that, I'm telling you, you watch. They're gonna come for the in fact, Vox even wrote a piece about this. Well, if Alex Jones is banned, then you have to go after all the people like that are sort of just slightly right of Jordan Peterson's not even right. He's not, he's like it's like
I've
calling
never heard
him
him
or Joe
express a
Rogan
political
or
belief.
Eric Weinstein, these people on the
Yeah.
right is ridiculous. But that's what the whole point is that they're reframing. So okay, well now we've got Alex Jones. Now we've got a deplatform. It is a tribal fight, dude. This is not a fight about facts. This is that's why you see those people redefine um, uh, s- uh, you redefine hate speech as violence, right? Because as soon as you say speech is violence, you can say, well, Alex Jones is encouraging violence against schools because he thinks Sandy Hook was a false flag, right? It's a ridiculous, convoluted argument. But if no one's paying attention, and you're right, and there isn't no tribe is gonna defend Alex Jones. He's a conspiratorial kook, right? But like either we have free speech or we don't. That dude is the definition of like, oh man. And like, don't give me like private company bullshit. No, no, no. When you have networks, especially network markets like the tech platforms have become, there is the legal argument's very clear for this. There is an easement thing. He has built and created a lot of value on those platforms. He has at least some right to some sort of it's a gray area, but some sort of objective standard being applied, and there is none.
Well,
There's zero because if he goes, I'm telling you, you watch. Fox is going after all the people like Candace Owens, and there's a bunch. There's a huge list of people on YouTube who are sort of like Jordan Peterson, but not quite as smart, who great videos and whatever, and people like. I mean, I don't watch any of them, so that's why I don't know any of their names. But they're gonna go for them next, dude. You watch, dude. This is not like oh, this is gonna happen in 5 years. It's happening right now
well,
because this is a tribal fight. That's what it
what
is.
strikes me is that um, it's not illegal on the side of the tech platforms because there was actually a big case in the '90s with Prodigy. I don't know if you remember Prodigy was
Of
this
course.
not quite a social network, but maybe the first big popular message board alongside early AOL, and people sued Prodigy because there was some Nazi group spewing their hate stuff, and Prodigy didn't take their messages off, so groups sued,
Yeah.
and the
So
court
that's
said
why
went up to the Supreme Court that Prodigy, since they have no control, since they're not doing any
they're not editorial,
curating,
right? So what
you
started the
can't
DMCA?
you can't decide here I'm going to edit, but here I'm not.
Right. No, it's what started the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, which is kind of the controlling law for all of this. Look, I'm not going to make this out to be simple legally. It is a gray area, right? Like I get the argument YouTube's private. They don't have to host Alex Jones. Of course not. I get that. But there's it's much more complex than that, dude. It's not that simple. I wish it was.
Well, okay, then, but to segue it back to literally, you asked the question, what matters to you? How do you define success? It's not like you're going to stand up and, fight,
This
your
isn't
whole
my fight.
life. Right.
No,
But
it's kind of funny. We've been talking about this for 30 minutes, but this isn't even my fight.
no, but
Yeah.
I would say it is a little bit because with Scribe Media, I'll just describe a little bit what you do. Your point is many people have stories. many people don't have the skills or time to write their stories. Let's say the best surgeon in the world, he's busy saving his lives.
Right.
He's never put in the 10,000 hours it requires to be a
Tiffany
good
Haddish is
writer.
actually the best example ever.
Yeah, Tiffany Haddish is like a
Tiffany
brilliant
came
comedian.
from nothing. Foster care, the worst stuff. Go. You want to see what books do? Go. You don't have to read Tiffany Haddish's book. Go look at the reviews. She has 2,000 reviews on Amazon. I think she has over 30,000 reviews on Audible because her audience are mostly young urban youth, right? Especially girls. They listen, they don't read. Cool. Go look at her Audible reviews. Go read them. If you aren't crying by page 2, you don't have a heart. Not every review. I mean, just like every other review is a 13-year-old black girl saying things like, I had no idea this was possible. I had no idea real celebrities came from where I came from and had all these other issues too. I had no idea
Right. So,
this
and she
existed.
she wasn't necessarily going to get published by the
No, she
mainstream
wasn't.
until she was a superstar.
Right, she wasn't.
You guys were working with
We
her
came in
right
early.
before superstardom,
Yep.
and I think your point is basically people should have a platform to express their story instead of being chosen by a gatekeeper. It's a very what I would call choose yourself kind of company.
Yes.
You could basically
100%.
decide I want to write a book for my own reasons and not because some other publisher wants to take 90% of the profits off of my name
Yes.
and publish only the story. I like one time, and it's horrible dealing with mainstream publishers. One time I wrote a book and an editorial, I made a comment about climate change that an assistant to an assistant of the editor didn't agree with. They would not publish the book unless I changed this one comment. I didn't change the comment. They did publish the book because they had already advertised it to
Yeah.
bookstores. But just the fact that I had to deal with that,
Yeah. Yeah.
like I presented like a million articles on both sides, actually,
Yeah.
saying that both sides are legit. There's super scientists like Bill Gates on one side, and his scientists, another big guy on this other side, and their scientists. All I was doing was presenting that there's two sides to the story, and they were so upset. So your point is look, tell your story. We'll help you make it the best possible story. We'll help you get customers. We'll help you understand the publishing business because it's kind of complicated and that's the service you perform for your customers.
Yes.
That's why Tiffany comes to you. That's why Nassim Taleb, who's published major bestsellers with major publishing companies, comes to you.
He wants to own the rights to his book. He wants to control everything, so he works with us.
Right. So on an economic level too, it makes sense. People don't realize that though. People think there's a stigma to publishing this way. But if I hold up a book to somebody who says this to me and I say, okay, tell me who published this book.
No one
No
knows.
one, no one, no one knows the name of
No,
any
I
publisher.
actually, you know what's funny? Self-publishing, 30 years ago used to be called vanity publishing. I actually think traditional publishing is now vanity publishing. Because if you go with traditional, the reason is because you feel like you need that external validation from a publishing company. That's the vanity now.
Right.
When you can publish the exact same book, in fact, usually better. You work with a company like us, or you even do it yourself. I mean, God knows we're not the only way to do it, but you can do a better book by yourself, and you can own everything, or you can go give up 85 to 95% or whatever to a publisher. They don't do anything other than put their name on the spine and confer, and I'm saying this in quotes if you're listening, credibility. It's bullshit. There's
That's the
no
only thing,
credibility.
because they don't get you in bookstores.
No.
They don't get you on bestseller lists.
Nope.
They have no marketing
No
ability.
marketing. None.
And by the way, the best editors are independently editing.
They
They're
work
not
for
working for
us.
the publishers.
The best editors work for us.
Right. Well, I use
We
Neil
pay
Parker
more.
for Choose Yourself.
Yeah, we pay more.
So it's interesting though because the stigma, the gatekeeper thing is so powerful. Like people want to be liked by someone with higher status.
The emperor has no clothes, man.
Yeah.
When the emperor is naked, you're not gonna. Who's going to be the one to say that?
And there's another great point you made. I heard you give in a talk in 2014, which always stuck with me, which is that, and I'm going to extend it a little bit. Publishers, their definition of success is if your book sells a lot of copies in the first 2 weeks, they'll be your friend.
Yeah.
That's their only agenda.
Yeah.
But and I say that not being degrading to them. That's
their business model.
That's their business model, and that's fine. And I've dealt with it. We've all dealt with it. But you made this great point. What if somebody just wants to have 5 readers, their great-grandchildren, and why can't they write their book? Like, I wish my great-great-grandfather wrote a book where his only audience would have been me,
Yep.
but in today's world, we think a book can't be written for that purpose because that's what we've been trained. No, Random House won't publish that. Barnes& and Noble won't share it. Uh, but that's a totally valid reason to write a book
Of
as
course it
well.
is. Absolutely. That's why JT came to us, right? He didn't think anyone would care about his story. He just wanted to tell his story to his kids because, JT's got all the money in the world now. He's afraid his kids are going to grow up rich, entitled, spoiled brats in the suburbs. He wanted to make sure they knew where they came from, right? But then it turns out the book's amazing. He's got an incredible story. Everyone wants to hear it. Yeah, absolutely, dude. I mean, we're getting there. We're not at the point yet where we've created a platform where anyone can come in for almost any price and have access to really great tools to tell their story yet. Like in software or whatever, we have a book that walks through our exact process. So anyone who wants to do it can do it. The tools are out there, but no, our goal eventually is so that here's the thing: you kind of you're conflicting two things. Having a
Why am I always
platform,
wrong?
you're not wrong. You're just putting two things together. Having a platform upon which to distribute your voice is a different thing than having help understanding what your voice is and getting it into a medium. They're two different things,
I
right?
agree with that.
So like getting good at a podcast and then putting it on iTunes are different things,
Right.
right? Okay. So the fight that we spent 30 minutes talking about, the Jordan Peterson, Alex Jones being deplatformed fight, right? That is not my fight. That is a very important fight. Other people are fighting that, really smart, accomplished people. I think eventually all of the distributed platforms are eventually going to become undistributed, and so you're going to have a YouTube and a Twitter and a whatever that are I don't know if it's going to be run off blockchain or whatever, but they're essentially totally decentralized, so that they'll be as close as possible to pure free speech platforms. There are problems with that. I'm not exactly sure how problems are going to be solved, but I think that's where we're going to go. Is that we live in a world now where authoritarian control doesn't work anymore. The genie is now out of the bottle. And so all the
Although it's
people,
a battle.
it is 100% a battle, and it is maybe the defining battle of the next 20 years. Is do we let governments and authoritarians on either right or left control means of distribution, or do we let the people? I sound like fucking Karl Marx, but it's true, man.
All
I
right,
mean,
so
I'm a
so
like Chicago school economist, but that is maybe the defining battle because I think the genie's out of the bottle too far, though. And I think all the mainstream media and all those people are playing the status tribal games of the last war. They're fighting the old war. All that's doing is creating the antibodies to that faster and faster. And there are too many smart people who have too much money and too much power on the other side now. And so we are getting slowly but surely to a freer world and platform wise. But that is essentially at its core a tech fight. That is not my fight. My skills are a different place. Because now imagine that war's won, right? Imagine today, I snap my fingers, the war's won, everyone has access, any platform they want, et cetera, et cetera. Cool. I feel like not the more important, the war after that is the knowledge in people's head and the wisdom in their head, getting it into a medium that other people can understand and relate to and consume.
okay, so let me ask you about this because we both know there's we know 1,000 people have written books for their own agendas. Like they don't necessarily want to write the best book, but they want consulting gigs, they want speaking
Of
gigs,
course,
they want business opportunities.
that's a huge number of our clients.
Right, and there's nothing wrong with that. The problem I have with that category is that most of those people are horrible writers, don't respect writing as a craft you have to work at,
Agreed.
and the books are just horrible.
That's why
And
they
so
work with us.
and right, and so I think those people should work with you. I feel like the next war is explaining to people you need to step up your game in terms of learning this craft.
Yeah, no, I disagree. I actually fundamentally disagree, man. That's like, you know what that sounds like an auto mechanic saying like, how can you really drive a car unless you know how to build an engine?
All right,
That's bullshit.
all
I
right,
disagree.
fair enough. Well, I think the problem is these people think that they're good writers and
Yeah,
they're publishing
but
the
you're
books.
talking about people who are writing the book themselves with no help because they think because they're good at their field, they're going to be good at writing. I totally agree with that. Writing is a very distinct, very different craft from being an expert at something. That's literally why our company exists because that's why we call it Scribe, is literally because Socrates was a brilliant genius man who set the foundation for Western culture in many ways. Um, no one would know who he is if it weren't for Plato, if it weren't for his scribe.
Right, because he didn't write a single
He didn't wrote none
thing.
of it down, right? That's the difference. Is I feel like there are so many people who have so much brilliance in their heads that will never get it out, unless unless it's very easy for them, right? They don't necessarily have to work with another person. I feel like we can create our process so that it becomes very low friction and you kind of do it. I don't want to say automated, but it's very much a do it yourself way. Um, I think as we build the tech, I'm in this to win this, man. This is a 20, 30, 40-year company for me. So we'll get there eventually. But we're starting right now with the most successful people on earth who have have done immense amount, who have made money from it, which are not the only people who have things to say at all. But we got we got to start somewhere, right? Like iPhones, set the category. And now 3 billion people have smartphones. We're doing the same thing. We're setting the category, and eventually, I want our service to be available to literally everyone. But the point is, th- there is every day millions of people die with all this genius and wisdom and knowledge locked up in their heads, and it doesn't get out, and it dies with them. And that there is all civilization is the compounding of wisdom. That's it. You and I are sitting, you can't tell me how those lights work, or this camera, or this microphone. These work because geniuses before us figured this out. Then the knowledge became institutionalized as part of it became a commodity, right? But too little of that happens. Like the example I always use is the Library of Alexandria. The Egyptians were a culture of scribes, and they wrote everything down. Alexandria was the most important trading port for most of what we would consider the BC time, like pre Jesus, right? And a little bit even in after. But every ship that came in, the rule in the port was if you had a scroll or anything written down, you had to give it to the scribes and they would copy it and then give it back to you, right? And so the Library of Alexandria had every piece of written wisdom in the world. And they would send scribes out to like sit with people like Socrates or whoever the geniuses at the time were and write down what they were saying. They were obsessed with writing things down. That was their thing. And then Cleopatra had a fight with Caesar, and Caesar burned it to the ground, and the world lost all of that wisdom that was not written down. And that didn't cause us to fall into a dark ages, but once the Roman Empire fell, we went into a dark ages because none of that knowledge was recorded anywhere else. Well, you realize in the last 30 years, we figured out how the Romans made the concrete they did that keeps aqueducts up for 2,000 years. We figured out about 30 years ago how the pyramids were built, which are 5,000 years old, right? All of this wisdom was lost. All civilization is the compounding of wisdom. I feel like this is maybe the most important long-term fight we have is what we're doing. The platform fight's a different fight though. Like if I have my way and we have our way at Scribe, no one dies with anything in their head that someone else in the future will want to know.
Well, and I think, not to kind of just suddenly take the conversation immediately to the practical that everyone could take advantage of, but I think you having such a historical motivation for a business, it's a motivation that stretches thousands of years. This is why this is a good reason to start a business. I think, and let's take the opposite end. Oh, I want to make $1 million in the next year. That's the opposite end of that of the reason you should start a business. That's the bad reason to start. In my opinion, you won't succeed
Yeah,
if you
if you
have
don't care about the problem at all, then you're not going to succeed.
right. So
Yeah.
solving, and a lot of people say, oh, if you help 1 billion people, you'll make $1 billion. I don't necessarily believe that either. I think the most important thing is having a vision that is so ingrained in everything you've done over the past 2 decades.
Yes.
That's a great reason to start a business, and then having customers who buy into that vision, which clearly they do. Having a CEO who bought into that vision, he did his book through you. I think that's critical. You have a great culture at the business. Everybody is like lifers at your business.
Yeah.
I've known them for ever since they started working for you, years and years and years ago. What's the next you just said you stepped down as CEO, JT stepped up because people would follow you, but people would like die for JT.
Yeah.
Um, what does JT bring in terms of motivation on top of that supports the vision that you just laid out? Because I think that's a very practical skill that
No, no, no.
businessmen should
It's a
know.
great question. All right. So here's what it's actually going to be hard for me to say because it makes me realize things about myself that aren't necessarily the most pleasant. But if I'm gonna be all about the truth, then I got I gotta I gotta do it even when it's not palatable. I think people love JT because he loves them back.
Mm.
Like great leader loves the people that they lead and they put them first. And he is a master at that. And I feel like I am not. It's not that I don't care about them. It's not. I just he's far, 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 well, farther along on that path than I am.
What do you think internally did that for him? Particularly given his background.
I don't know, man. I don't know. It's a good question. You're gonna have to ask him when he's on the
When is
podcast.
he in the city? Is he ever coming to the
Uh,
city? He's busy in Austin.
yeah, right. He's busy. He's busy. I know he's coming. I think later this year. So of course, I'll make sure that you talk to him because you two will love each other. But um, it, the reason our tribe loves him so much is because they know he loves them. And it's not just oh yeah it's not most companies like oh we care about our people, it's all mouth, it's all word, it's all bullshit. It's not bullshit with JT, it's real with him. Like every single person in our company can tell you a story about how JT uh they've seen him either love them or other people or both, and all the stories are going to be different. It's not like there's a mythology of JT. It's personal. Like he really cares at the core of his soul.
So I think these two things, like having an outward facing vision that you truly like deeply believe in and it's got a historical foundation and it's true. Like if you think about it, you know, there was the Gutenberg press, which allowed which allowed basically anybody to write.
Anyone
Then
to print at scale is what
right.
it was.
And then I think there's this brief period where publishers would help and bookstores would help with distribution, and I think that era is dying. But then the combination of a mega platform like Amazon making it easy to distribute, plus companies like yours making it easy to take an enormous skill set and translate that into something that's readable. I think this is, and I'm not just saying this to build you up. I think that's like the next step after the Gutenberg press. Finally, people could once again, say what they believe in, communicate it in a way that's effective, and distribute it. And now look, some people don't need you. If you have the skills of writing,
Yeah,
if
no,
you
do
can
it
get a
yourself.
cover
Great, no
designer,
problem.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But again, a major someone who's been a heart surgeon for 50 years, they're not going to have the 10,000 hours to build the writing craft.
Exactly, or it doesn't even make sense for them to. Like,
Right? They're busy saving
above a
lives.
certain amount that you make, it doesn't make sense for you to even manage the process even if you could, because you're taking time away from what you're great at to spend time at even something even if you're good at it. I mean, that's just the basic law of comparative advantage. That's basic economics. If you make I'm just make up numbers. If you make $100 an hour even, it makes no sense not to hire us because, for you to if you spend your time doing the book yourself, it's costing you $100 an hour and you can hire us effectively for less than that at a per hour cost, right? So it makes zero sense for you not to
So,
hire us
but let's
or
look.
somebody, but
But let's
even
look
though
at a
we're
guy
the
though
best.
like Nassim Taleb, who's a great writer. He's not gonna using you
No, he's
for
not using it. So we have a publishing arm. So you can come to us with just your idea, and then we have like a whole interview process that takes you all the way through, and we do all the work. I mean, it's 36 grand now, total turnkey. It's kind of like ghostwriting, but it's not ghostwriting because ghostwriting is like where someone's writing their idea of your book. This is a full interview process. It is your ideas in your words and your voice. Then once the manuscript is done, then we do all the publishing. Or you can come to us with a finished book, like you've written it yourself. Cool, no problem. We do all the publishing. So that's Nassim is not at all in any way, shape, or form doing our sort of full process. Like it wouldn't make sense for you either.
no, in a
You're both
sense,
writers.
in a sense, I was like a alpha version
Yes.
of your
Choose
company
Yourself absolutely was
because
the alpha version.
because
Yeah.
I wrote the book and then you helped me with the editing, the
Editing.
cover design, interior
Cover. I
design,
we did all of it.
and then
Right.
even the formatting for Kindle and Create Space. And
Uh huh.
you gave me advice. That Choose Yourself's the first book I did as an audiobook because you said, A, you have to do an audiobook. And I followed your advice and it was great. And B, you literally called my ex wife and said, don't let James just read it in his bathroom or
Yeah.
whatever, like use
Go
this
to a studio.
studio and do it professionally.
Yeah.
And that kind of made an impression on me in the sense that if you're going to do something, make every aspect of it professional.
Yes.
And then you're still doing it yourself, but
Yes.
do it with the highest possible quality in every way. That's why for this podcast, for instance, we're doing it in person because I
Yeah.
think that's more
You've got
professional
great
than
mics. You
Skype.
got a whole team here.
Yeah, we're
Fantastic.
videotaping it, we're
Yep.
micing it, the audio quality is gonna be great, we're doing it in a professional studio,
Yep.
semi-professional studio. This is my stand-up club.
Yeah, right. Of course.
So,
Yeah.
but we have podcast studios in here. G so doing everything professionally, I feel like I was like the alpha version of
Yes.
of
100%
what
you
you
are.
did.
Yes.
So
100%.
and then, I don't know, I guess I just wanted to boil it down to, like, you're still, 20 years later engaged heavily in the writing process. People should just read one chapter of any of your books just to see an example of what good writing is. But what would you say for you are the top 3 rules of writing?
This is what we tell our authors. Like we now have a program actually called Guided Author, where it's the exact same process for the 36 grand, but instead of us doing all the manuscript work for you, we tell you what to do and then you do it, right? And with our guidance. So it's like a third less, but you're gonna have your hands on the keyboard, but you're gonna have total guidance. And then when you finish, we do all the publishing, right? So like people love this now. This is because there's some people who are just like, okay, you do it's my knowledge. I'm gonna get on the phone with you. I'm gonna dump my soul into the calls, but then you do everything else. And there are people who like just want to do it themselves. Great, no problem. There's a middle tier who want a lot of guidance and a lot of help, but they do want their fingers on the keyboard, right? And so those people are perfect for guided author. Anyway, so I'll tell you what I tell those people. The number one there's three things. This is literally our positioning. This is our structure, how we do it. The first thing you have to understand is what are you trying to accomplish with this book or this piece of writing? What is your goal? Because if you don't know why you're writing it, you're just going to write meandering nonsense, right? So, and I don't mean part of your goal can be the impact you want the book to create in the world. That's cool and important, but you should also be thinking about what do you want this book to create for you, right?
What do you mean? What's an example?
Okay, so if I'm a consultant, if I'm a CEO coach, right,
Mhm.
and I coach Fortune 1000 CEOs, I'm doing this book because I want to raise my. I'm already the expert. I already coach a bunch of CEOs, but no one kind of knows except the guys I coach. So or the women and men. So I want this book to kind of show the world to establish my authority in this space and credibility to show the world I know what I'm talking about, right? And to show that it's not about bragging, it's about here's what I do, here's my knowledge, it's about here's my knowledge and wisdom so that I have the authority and credibility in my space. I want this book to be kind of the hook for media, so it raises my visibility. So it's easy for me to get speaking gigs. It's easy for me to go on podcasts. Like if I'm the best CEO coach in the world, you're not having me probably on your podcast. But if I have the book that is the definitive CEO coaching book, you're probably going to have me on your podcast now. So it's a authority, visibility, and then also it's a legacy piece for me. Like I've done amazing work. Like I've helped all these companies, these CEOs do well, which help these companies do well. I kind of want, my friends, family, whatever to know I've produced real value in the world.
You're saying this is the number one
And I'm
rule
not
for
I'm not a fucking CEO coach. I'm the worst,
right.
right?
So you're saying though this though as a rule for writing. How does this translate into better writing?
So hold you got to stick with me now
Uh,
because once you know what you're trying to accomplish, right? Whereas you and I write for entertainment, right? Or my old stuff was I
right,
want to make people laugh. Totally different than establishing authority and credibility. Just different
right.
goals. But you must understand what your goal is. What is your objective with this book? Because once you know your objective, now you know who your audience is, right? So if my goal is to establish authority with CEOs of Fortune 1000 companies, my audience are CEOs of Fortune 1000 companies and the people that influence them. That's
Right.
my only
So that
audience.
can motivate, let's say the first line of a book like that is uh your billion-dollar revenues, your billion-dollar revenue company is about to go bankrupt. The bank is on the phone. You're scared to death and you're hiding under the table.
If you're James
I'm gonna
Altucher, that's the first line.
I walked in and we
Yeah, we start talking or
yeah.
whatever. Right.
So
Yeah. Right. So now you know who your audience is, right? So in your case, let's say you want to do a book on how cryptocurrency is the future of money. You want to like establish your authority in that space. You want to help people understand that, all that kind of stuff. So then your audience are people who are interested in crypto, people who are looking for other investments. Like, you see what I'm saying? Of
Mhm.
course.
Right.
So number one is what are your objectives? Number two is who is your audience? That gets you to the third thing. Notice I haven't talked about what the idea for the book is. Everyone wants to start there, but that's about them. The third thing is why will your audience care? Because no one cares about your book. No one. They only care about themselves and they care about what your book will do for them. So for the CEO example, the answer is if I'm the CEO of a Fortune 1000 company, I'm only going to care about your book if I think you're going to help me learn things and get better at my job. Same with you. The only reason anyone's going to care about your crypto book is because you're going to help them figure out crypto so that they can make more money and be ready for the future or whatever, right? Invest in or whatever. So now if you get all three of those, now it all dovetails, right? Because once you understand your objectives, then you know who your audience is. Now you know what you have to write about, right? Now you know how to frame it too. The big problem that most writers make is they approach the book from their own perspective. But no one cares about you and they don't care about your book. They only care about what your book will do for them. What our process does, or what the process I just detailed to you, it helps you clearly identify why an audience will care for your book, and it helps you write to that. So that because if you do not write this book in service of an audience, it will not get you any benefits at all. At all. It will probably flop because there's so much content and there's so many alternatives now. Why would someone read something that's not about them?
I think that's a really good point that I wanna get back to. I also think the most important thing you said there is nobody cares about you or your book,
Yes.
because I think that all your rules fall out of that
Yes.
principle, which
Yes.
is that everybody has a self-inflated view of, like, why people should care about them. You have to actually build the argument
Well,
in the book.
here's what's crazy. So we walk so many. We've done this. We've worked with 1,000 authors now or something. So we've done this so much. But everyone starts off. People who don't know books, right? They start off being like they think they kind of want to write a book about themselves or about all the cool things they've done. And so what we always do is we kind of run them through this process, and what they realize, we talk them around to understanding that the book has to be positioned for the audience. And they get that. Everyone gets that, and they understand why, and they understand the logic once we kind of walk them through it. But they think in their minds there's a dichotomy between either the books about me or the books about my readers. Not true. The best books are positioned for the reader, meaning like basically, here is what you're going to learn. Here is the benefit for you, right? But that's kind of like sell them what they want, right? You sell them the benefit. But the actual book itself has tons of your own stories in it. The reason is because now all those stories are in service of teaching them what they want to know and delivering the benefit. The stories aren't about they could be totally about you, but every story is relevant to something they're learning. The reason is because number one, humans learn through story much better than they learn any other way. So if you can tell a story that it makes your point, they're going to learn it and they're going to read it and they're stay engaged. And two is people will then connect with you and they will care about you. You are a master at this, at teaching relatively complex or relatively straightforward things, teaching information through story. That's what you do. That's why you are who you are. That's why millions of people are going to listen to this podcast, is because you don't lecture people. You don't just lay out the information. You give it to them in the context of a story that they can understand and relate to. So really what we do with almost everybody is we take them and reframe them from this book's about me to this book's about the audience, but I will teach the audience through stories about me.
But then the craft of storytelling, there's gotta be, like,
Oh
what's
yeah, dude, that's deeply difficult. It's one of those. It is extraordinarily deep and difficult and intense. So, but there's actually it's one of the I give our sort of guided author people. If you go to just Scribe and you're turnkey, you don't really have to learn it so much because we have master writers and storytellers and editors who essentially do it for you. But if you're writing it yourself, here's the hack that we teach people. So s- the way you want to think about don't think about telling a story, right? Because if you try to learn story structure, it's ridiculously complex and you will get lost in the weeds as a novice or as an amateur. But the way you can kind of hack in and get close to being a professional with very, very little work is to think of your book as I am going to teach a friend of mine who is ignorant of this knowledge, not stupid, they're just ignorant, right? I am going to teach them this. So that first, that structure makes you forces structure. Okay, where am I going to start? What's the second thing I'm going to teach? What's the third thing? What's the fourth thing? Then it forces you to only tell stories that are relevant. Like, imagine I'm sitting across the table from a friend, like you are a friend. Imagine I'm going to teach you about something you care about, right? That I know about. Like being a parent. I mean, you're a parent more than I am, but like, let's just take that as an example.
I
Um,
might be a bad parent, so
well,
not
I
a
don't know
parent.
if I'm good either, but it's an easy example, right? So let's say you don't have kids, you're about to have kids. So I'm gonna say, all right, James, you need to start here, and then I'm gonna like whatever it is, understanding the parenting's about the kid, not about you or something, and then I'm gonna like kind of tell you the facts, and then I'm gonna tell you like one or two stories, right? Because if you come to me and ask me, that's how I'm gonna say, well, you need to know this and this, fact one and fact two, and like the way I learned fact one is, and then tell the story, and the way I learned fact two is, and then tell the story, right? If you just do that, you are going to have a very, very good book.
Right, if you just say the facts without the stories, no one's listening.
No. Well,
Because
it
you're right.
doesn't land anywhere. It doesn't
Right,
connect.
it's a primal, almost biological thing that we tell through storytelling. I just wanted to add one thing to that, which is often when I'm writing a book, it's not like, "Oh, I'm such an expert, so I'm gonna tell you all these great stories." I'm kinda learning myself while I'm writing the book. I'm having stories while I'm writing the book. Like, I didn't write the book Choose Yourself because I was so great at, like, avoiding the gatekeepers. It's because I felt my whole life like I needed to be validated by them, and it was a disaster, was a result, and I'm in the middle of a disaster, and so writing the book is almost my processing that
Yes.
disaster. That's the
Yes.
story. So that's where it is the story of me a little bit, but it's using it
100%.
to kind of say, "Okay, here's how here's a state that many of us are in, being stuck because the gatekeepers blocked us. Here's how I got out of it. You could use my advice or not. I'm not being a lecturer.
Yeah.
I'm just telling my
You
story."
know what's so funny, man? In the guided author, so the way guided author works is that everyone in the program comes to Austin for 2 days, and they spend 2 days with me and two of my senior team. And it's not individual; like we'll do it in cohorts, where it's basically a 4-to-1 ratio. So there's at least four authors to one sort of editor. So like 12 people will be me and two senior editors, right? And so we walk them through the positioning, kind of like what I just. That's the beginning of our
Right.
positioning process, and then we walk them through. We build the entire outline with them, we do the writing schedule, all that sort of stuff. So when they leave, they know exactly what they're writing, when they're writing, all that. They got it all dialed in. They just have to go home and write. Okay. And then of course we have ongoing support when they go home and weekly calls and all that stuff. But here's what's funny is you just and it makes total sense because you're a writer and you get it. I always end the workshop with uh, why your book matters. And so for each person, I give like not even a 5-minute speech, a 2-minute speech about why their book matters. And what's so funny is I would say almost every 95% of people, here's the narrative of the book is they had a real problem in their life. They figured out a way to solve it. Now they're bringing that wisdom to other people who have that problem. Even if they're doing the book for business, 100% for business, that's still the narrative. Like
But what's funny
like
there is what you just
that's the
described,
hero's journey.
it's the hero's
Literally the
journey
hero's
on
journey.
top of the hero's journey.
Right.
So they already had
Exactly.
the hero's journey, which is their problem. Now they have what our friend Steve Pressfield calls the artist journey,
Yes.
which is like, how do you take the hero's journey to express your prior hero's journey?
Exactly right. So like a iconic example is there's this woman, Anita, who came through and she's a sales consultant, like really high end. She's an amazing sales trainer. She was like she's this small little Indian woman and very demure and whatever. And she got into sales and was terrible at it and like had struggled with it and was gonna whatever, all this sort of stuff. And then she taught herself sales. She got really good at it and like amazing at it, right? And so she was kind of like the iconic sort of tech person, right? Terrible at dealing with people, whatever. She taught, like, got her amazing at it, became a baller salesperson, and then realized that she had a skill she could teach tech people how to become
Hmm.
salespeople. And so and then so she became a consultant. She's really good at it. Now she wants to level up and be seen as the sales trainer for tech people, right? And she told me this story about this guy Antonio that like basically was not like he couldn't feed his family. He was in sales, like a kind of a like a nerdy, like bad with people tech person, like could like wasn't like was failing, was not even feeding his family. And he was one of her first clients. and she turned him around in like a few months, and now the guy is like a top grossing salesperson for some, whatever B2B sales tech company, right? But he like lives in a great house. His wife's happy. I mean, she literally changed the life of this family, right? And it's like that. So I never start with hero's journey because then they get it in their head that they get all weird. I walk them through it without telling them what it is, and then at the end, I'm like, now look at what you've done. Now you have the entire template. You have the map to go do your heroes. You did the journey yourself. Now but that's the whole point of the hero's journey, James, is that when you come back, when you cross this threshold, you go on the adventures, you fight the demon, you get the treasure, right? The treasure then you bring back to the village and share with everyone. That is the whole point.
Right.
So they're in that stage now of you've got the treasure, that's their knowledge. The book is how they bring it back and share it with everyone.
Right.
That's the thing. And so I walk them through that, and it's like, then now they're all excited and they get the book's not, yes, it helps them with business, and yes, that matters a lot, but like they get that there's a purpose beyond them for the book.
So let me ask one step further, which is almost kind of a meta question to your business, which is 10 years from now, where's media heading? Now, think about 10 years ago. You could write a book, like Malcolm Gladwell could write a book and become famous because of that book, and
Yeah.
that's it. That doesn't really happen anymore. I
No.
mean, the only example I've really seen, honestly, in the past 10 years was Jordan
Jordan
Peterson.
Peterson, but he didn't become famous because of his book.
No, it's because of his YouTube videos.
Yes.
So,
The
and because of
book just came
controversy,
afterward.
like he kind of hitched onto a huge controversy, and that propelled
He had a
his
huge
videos.
audience
Right.
before the book came out.
Right. So, and then you see, I'm going to expand it further. You see Netflix spending 13 billion a year buying new shows. That's going to fail in disaster because nobody has time to watch 200 new shows. There's not even a long tail of that. Like most shows get no viewers. So TV is going to change. Book publishing is going to change. Music's already changed. The one social media network with the by far the greatest number of new users is Instagram, which we know is just like the worst photographs in the world. So what's actually, are we just degenerating into this
No, we're changing.
splooge of bad media?
No. That's never how it works, man. Everything runs in cycles. You know that, man. You're a trader. You
Well,
understand
okay,
cycles.
but maybe because I'm so immersed in the middle of it, I'm seeing sort of a big picture, like how everything's kind of changing and failing in weird ways. But where do you see it coming out at the end?
For what media?
For media in general, for you as a person who wants to express a message. For you as a person, a young person can say, "Oh, Tucker did a blog and then a book, and the book was a bestseller." That can't happen anymore. Like even when I had Seth Godin on a few weeks ago, and when I had him on a year earlier, every single time he always says year over year his blog views get cut in half. So like that phenomenon of blog to book is done. For instance, so what's the pathway now of multimedia?
So
Or
you got to look at it. You're looking at it too small,
Mhm.
right? You're looking like a finance chart. You zoom down to 3 months and trying to extrapolate. No, you got to zoom out. Dude.
Okay,
You got to zoom out to 10 years.
just why I'm
Actually,
asking you the
more.
question.
I would zoom out to 20 or 30 or 40-year view on this at a minimum. So we went through a weird period in history where media is centralized. And that is like extraordinarily unusual. If you look at the scale of humanity, media was almost always local.
Right, and that's why I say in the history of book publishing, there was Gutenberg. We could almost skip over traditional book publishing and bookstores, and then there's kind of what you're doing, Amazon, and so on. So like I skip over completely publishing because that was just a fluke almost.
Yeah. Well, so no, but here's the thing. Media was centralized for about truly centralized, I would say for about you can make an argument of somewhere between 80 and 150 years, right? So just
Yeah.
call it 100 years. Media was centralized.
Right, because guys like Charles Dickens self-published.
Right. So like centralization, if you look at look in the aggregate, we went from essentially tribes to an agrarian economy to an industrial economy, and we're coming out of that into a digital economy, right? And so in the industrial world, it made sense for everything to be bundled because there were economies of scale. That was the part of the tech evolution we were in. Going into a digital world, bundling doesn't make sense anymore because
What do you mean by bundling?
I mean everything. Like okay, so think about what's a really easy example. Think about tools, right? prior to let's just call it 1900. I'm being very rough here. So like prior to 1900, if you wanted a tool, you went to the blacksmith in your town and he made it for you, right? After 1900, and again, very very rough, tools were made in factories. Really, probably after World War One, tools were made in factories. Like no blacksmith was making a shovel anymore, right? Why? Because you can make shovels faster, easier in factories. But it took a long time for the industrial corporatist world to develop and reach that sort of scale, right? But now it's like everything is a commodity, right? And physical goods are essentially all commodities, except for land. But but we're going back, I think, to a we're not going to go backwards in terms of tech because nothing goes backwards. It all moves forward and things are recombined. We're going into a world where you can become local again, where you can be small scale, but still you can enjoy so many of the benefits of mass scale production. But humans are not designed to be parts of massive bureaucracies. We are not designed to be parts of big systems. We are designed to operate on a small scale in small groups that we all know and trust and respect. We're designed to have skin in the game with each other. That's the way socially we are designed, right? And I think everything mass and everything scale is breaking up. Media is just
Mm.
is in that phase, right? And so I think it's not that there's going to be micro brands. It's that everyone is gonna. You're gonna have maybe the days of mass media are gone, dude. They're just gone, and
Right,
they're
and I
not
agree with that.
coming back. And so what that means is so many people still, it takes humans a long time to adapt to things, to tech, right? So what we're going to see is not even a million micro brands. It's going to be, I'll give you a good example for professionals. If you are a high level professional, let's just say, I'll make up a number to make it easy. If you make 500,000 or more, you're essentially going to have your own brand, your own professional brand, and your own media, right? You don't need a media company. You don't have to be James Altucher because you are a media person. If I'm a CEO coach, I don't need to be a media person. But what I do have to have is media, right? I have to have a book. I have to have maybe some video. I have to have at least, I don't have to have everything covered in all areas, but I have to have at least one or two major media areas covered that show my proof of work so that when CEOs need a coach, they're not going to the New York Times. They're not going because the mass doesn't exist. They
Right.
have to go look for people who are CEO coaches and then they have to pick the one. How are they going to pick? Right? They have to pick based on proof of work. The days of certain people being the approved vendors of the large scale mass are gone. And so in media, you're going to see Godin and people like that are going to have a harder time being high end because there's no more mass. It won't exist anymore. The days of mass are gone, and you will see lots and lots and lots more of niche and niche and niche and niche, which is fine. That's the way humans work, man.
So,
It's better.
right. So, but some people might be hearing this disappointed. Like they want to take they're just interested in writing, let's say entertaining writing, and they have a voice and and people like what they do, and they want to be mass.
Yeah.
What should they do?
Well, then that's an ego thing.
Uh,
That's
it is
their
an ego
no.
thing.
That's their. Well, then I mean, okay. You want to if you want to live your life.
It's how you got your start. You
Yeah,
were
of
able to
course. Oh,
ride.
absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. No, I'm not saying I don't fall in that category. I did definitely
Yeah.
early on. Look, so here's the thing. I'm not saying mass is impossible, but I'm saying mass used to be there were one or two. The power curve was very, very steep and came down very quickly and there was almost no long tail. Now, so much of that has shifted, and now the middle part, I think, is going to become a little bit fatter, but the long tail will become massively fatter, but will also sustain. So, like, if you want to become mass because it depends what the goal is. If you want to be mass because you want to support yourself doing your art, that is now easier than it's ever been, and it's only going to get easier. If you want to become mass because you want to fill your empty fucking soul with a bunch of people staring at you, those days are over and
Right.
you're fucked.
And it brings up Kevin Kelly's Thousand True Fans article, which is that
Yes.
you need whatever media you choose, whatever multiple media you choose, you need to really be good at expressing yourself in that medium
Yes.
because loyalty rather than numbers are more important.
Yes.
Like you can get a million views on something, but if it's all,
If it's all garbage views, doesn't mean anything.
right, like which is a lot of, let's say, Instagram likes, so it's done by bots or whatever.
Right.
But if you have those 1,000 true fans, 2,000 true fans, 10,000 true fans, you're going to do well and have impact.
I could not agree more.
So, gosh, I feel like we've talked about so many topics. We could keep going. I could ask you for relationship advice next. What should I do next? You see me do all these things. What should I do
I don't
next?
know, dude. I don't know enough
How do
details.
I improve?
That's why I want
How
to
do
go
I
get
improve
lunch
this
with you.
podcast?
Yeah. How do you what?
How do I make the podcast bigger? Podcast is already pretty big. How can I switch up format? I've been interviewing you for 5 years, and 500 people like you.
That's a really good question. So I'll tell you where I think podcasts are going. So your podcast interview style is mass media style. I
Yes.
think that's going away. I think it's
I
less
agree
and
with
less
you.
and less.
There's 600,000 interview podcasts out there.
Right, exactly. And there's only so many people to interview, and they all get the stupid rote answers, and it's played out. I actually think the future of podcasting is what I was talking about, is experts not even interviewing. They can be interviewed, whatever. It's experts displaying their expertise in teaching through podcast. So like, I mean, you see Tim doing this a lot, right? Who's a friend of ours.
Yeah.
Like I think that mass media was all about disposable content. That world is content doesn't have to be disposable anymore, man. Like if you looked at podcasts as I am going to record nuggets, not nuggets of wisdom, specific, like you want to learn how to write a great blog post, I'll write a piece about it, and then I'm going to record a podcast about it, right? And it doesn't have to, you don't read the piece necessarily. It's much more about whatever. And then James Altucher's podcast on how to write a great blog post, let's say, that can be, because search for podcasts will improve. Like discovery and search for podcasts is garbage now. That's going to improve. That's going to expand, I think, exponentially. And we're going to start seeing a lot of knowledge and wisdom contained in long tail stuff in podcasts.
I agree. And I think we've been gradually making the shift to that. And sorry, I've been doing so many podcasts, my voice is shot. But it's almost like in the middle right now. Like we'll have on a celebrity guest, and that almost status signals to other guests, oh, this is the type of podcast where he had X, Y, and Z. Okay, I'll go on there. But interestingly, those get the least number of views. Now they still get a lot of views, but less than the how to be this sort of podcasts.
Could not agree more, brother.
So listen, Scribe Media is great. I've always loved what you're doing, and I'm so glad you came on the podcast. I hate winding it down. Can we make this into a 2-part podcast, by the way?
Yeah,
Who's
of course.
Here, by the way? Do you know Steve Cohen? He's the podcast producer.
No. Hey, what's up? Nice to meet you.
You never had Tucker on Good Day New York?
No, we should. Yeah.
He was producer for TV for like 30 years.
Oh, wow.
On every morning show in New York.
Yeah. We definitely have. Yeah. No.
He also, Tucker, by the way, ages everybody. Not just you, me.
Yeah.
It was like 30.
Yeah, it was 30 years. Everybody is my age, all right? And if you're not my age, you're catching up to me. So, which, by the way, I just stole a Louis C.K. joke, right? He has, Britney Spears used to be a teenager, and now Britney Spears is his age. That's like one of his jokes.
That's also like your favorite Matthew McConaughey in Austin.
Yeah.
They keep getting
No. I keep getting older, and they stay the same age. High school girls.
Yeah, like Matthew McConaughey is the same age he's been since Dazed and Confused.
Yeah.
So we should go to Austin. There's like 1,000 people in Austin to do on the podcast.
Happy to help you.
Do you know Richard Linklater?
No.
No, he's in Austin.
Yeah. He is.
All right. Well, Tucker Max, once again, the 80th time you've been on the podcast. So much fun. I've learned so much stuff, and we've had so many interesting conversations. Come on again.
Thank you, brother.
Hey, thanks for listening to the James Altucher Show on YouTube today. I have more great episodes for you every single week. So don't forget to click my face right now and subscribe to the show. More episodes are here. More episodes are coming. Thanks so much for watching.